First up is the approval of the minutes from June 13th, 2022. Are there any corrections or additions? Okay, if there are none, we'll consider those to be approved. Number 3 is a public hearing on Hub's Landing Conditional Use Permit Dock Expansion 6 Spiral View Loop. Justin Fortney from staff is here.
Thank you very much. I'm going to first pass out a couple things.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the Planning Commission is asked to hold a public hearing tonight for a conditional use permit. It's essentially the same thing as a special use permit, but it's termed a conditional use permit in our floodplain ordinance. And this similar approval was granted in 2009 by the City of Hastings, following some studies that were done for this project and for some dredging and improvements to the shoreline. Since that time, about 2/3 of the additional 30 slips have been installed, and we're going to be putting in the last 11, and they were going to be changing the layout of those slips. And a change to a special use permit and a conditional use permit requires that it be reviewed and reissued. And so this is showing the aerial picture, how the site generally looks today. And these are some photographs of the area. It'll look clear in another aerial picture that has actually the paper I sent out has the proposed layout on it, but they generally are in the area of this red line. These are some pictures of the site. The parking areas, kind of a gravel mixture. There's not a lot of delineation. There are some areas that are marked for vehicles with boat trailers. You can see some of those lines on the ground. This is another aerial photograph of the current conditions. This was the 2009 layout. The green were going to be the additional slips. And this is what's proposed now, to have them continue, but closer to the shore and connect to that first dock that's along the shore, rather than lengthen that double slip dock that's out further away from the shore. I believe there's concerns with just the current and the forces on that dock, and possibly maneuvering in and around it. So the DNR has reviewed the proposed changes to the layout to determine if there was going to be any negative impact to the navigation of the area, and if it would increase any of the flood risk in the area compared to the previous layout that was reviewed for those issues. They found that it wasn't increasing those hazards because of the location being where it is, closer to shore and in line with those other improvements. So the DNR is all but acknowledged that they have no issues with any of that. They would be looking at, I think, some further details on the stockpile of the temporary dredging material that would come out of where those would be to make sure there's enough water depth there. Staff had raised some concerns over parking issues. There's been a lot of vehicles parking on that Spiral View Loop road. The applicant states that those vehicles aren't from this site, and he did approach the city on getting some no parking signs to put up in the area of their driveway because they were having issues with cars not being able to pull out of their driveway with trailers because of the angles and the narrowing of that street effectively with vehicles. So some of their parking that they have on site is used by a couple other uses that weren't used back in 2009 when this was reviewed. When this was reviewed in 2009, they were going to stop having the public launch accessible to anybody, which would lower their parking need down quite a bit. But since that time, they've also added 12 passes for individuals that used to use that dock or that boat launch regularly. And they also have some storage launch members of the marina. I think they have up to 25 of those available. I believe they're not all utilized right now, but those would be boats that are on trailers there that they would come with their vehicles and then launch them in the water and then take them out and leave them on site. So both of those uses take up a little bit of parking. They're kind of, I believe all those are probably delineated on there. Those looks like a lot of the boats on this aerial picture, and when you go down there are kind of around this circular area. The applicant states that the parking that they have there is adequate. The applicant said they do stack parking there. When multiple people come for the same boat, they would group their vehicles together and park in front of each other to use up less space. We did receive a letter from somebody who was claiming that they were a concerned member of the marina, that they don't believe that there's room for 11 people to park and people are currently being blocked in. They didn't specify if they were being blocked in by choice because they were grouping their vehicles together or if people were blocking in other people. But we do know that stacking does occur out there, and whether it's on purpose or with people in the same party who are going to get there at the same time and it won't be an issue because they can leave together, or if it's people blocking other people in, obviously it sounds like there is tight parking there to do that. And partially it might be because it's a gravel lot, so it's not delineated and marked well. Oftentimes that is an inefficient way to park. The applicant did submit a notice that I handed out to you that it was acknowledgement by the Association of Slip Owners for this application to the DNR for their review, and likely for, it would follow that it was also for this conditional use permit. So the association, 4 board members that are signatories on there, I believe 2 of them are from the applicant party, but with the other 2 that they are supportive of this proposal and they are aware of it. And the association itself didn't submit anything to the city. And we did publish a notice in the newspaper for this request and provided a notification within 350 feet of the request for the public hearing, and we didn't receive any other comments besides the one that you received tonight. Staff has been recommending approval for this proposal with some conditions that no more uses are allowed on the property than the 80 slips that are there and the 2 uses I mentioned that are related to people that would come and launch and park there while they are in the water, and then with the 25 leaving their boats behind. Partially because this was, the parking was reviewed in 2009 and approved, and partially because we don't have standards for parking related to marinas and boat slips, and it being more of a private site with membership rather than a site open to the public. We didn't take quite as strict a stance on it as we probably would have for another business. But again, there is the conditions that if they do run out of parking spaces for their uses, they have to either remove uses until the parking can be accommodated on site, or they could do improvements to the parking lot to assure that vehicles can all park there. So with that, I can answer any questions from the commission, or we can move to open the public hearing.
Okay, thanks, Justin. I think we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Okay, public hearing is now open. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak? If you do, if you'd please come on up to the podium, state your name and your address, and then make your comments known. Anyone? If you submitted the letters, we have those. Can you come up? We got to come up here. Yeah, so they can hear you on the recording.
Thanks, Justin. My name is Mark Fraser. I'm the one who submitted the application. Justin had informed us that we had to update this conditional use permit because our 2009 permit was getting old, and he thought it would be a good idea to run it by the Planning Commission and the City Council. So sorry we had to bring you out here on this nice night. I wanted to talk a little bit about a few things that Justin had mentioned to maybe help you out understand where we're at. So we had run through our EAW back in 2009, 2010. We had planned on putting those slips in then, but the bridge project was kicking off at that point in time, and we were asked by the Department of Natural Resources to hold off on that until the bridge project, because they, at that point in time, they didn't have any ideas on what side of the bridge it was going or where it was going. So we held off on that. During that EAW, we had asked if we could dredge. It would be this portion of the river right here for future expansion, or for maybe a better way to take boats in and out rather than our ramps, you know. And so that was part of the, Molly Shodine, the DNR hydrologist at the time, told us to put that in the EAW as well. So we put that in the dredging portion of it. So back then, as soon as the bridge project was done, we were able to put in 19 out of the 30 slips. And so we got those in, and then we hit low water, and I'm not sure, this area to the right, the sandbar crept all the way down, and so we had to dredge that material out. We either had to dredge material out, or we had to, our boats wouldn't get in and out. So we took the money that we were gonna spend on the new slips, and we purchased a dredge to get that material taken care of. So we were able to finish that dredge project last fall, and then so we started on the 11 slips project. And then so we've been working with Dan Skolin from the DNR and Daryl, I can't pronounce his last name, sorry, from the Army Corps of Engineers. And so what we had decided, what Dan and Daryl wanted us to do, they tentatively, Daryl okayed the project, but he has to run it through his internal people a little bit more. And then Dan okayed the project, and what we're going to do is this area right up here in this corner is where they want the dredge material to be placed. And we can build in a rock, they want us to build in a rock area, a berm, so that the water, when the dredge material gets pumped into this area, the water seeps through the rock, and then we have a silt fence out, and that alleviates the material from leaching back into the water. So that's the area you had mentioned about the material, and that's what was okayed with the DNR permit and hopefully with the Army Corps of Engineers. The other thing is, we don't allow, after the bridge project, and actually during the bridge project, we lost a huge amount of our customers with that project. You wouldn't think that we would be affected because they always had entrances and exits in and out of that area. MnDOT was pretty good at that. But for some reason, we did lose a huge percentage, and it took us years to get back to that, get back to normal. As a matter of fact, we probably last year we started getting back to normal in terms of rates. So in doing that, we changed our business model and no longer allowed public launching. So we closed our launch to the public. We had always had store and launch, but we never had season passes. I think maybe we did have the punch cards back then, and that's where you had mentioned that punch card. But that kind of fizzled out, but we always had store and launch. I don't know if you guys know what this looked like prior to the bridge, but this section of land and this section of land is Hub's Landing, or it's Hub's Yacht Club and Marinas. We were actually getting taxed on this portion of the land where the bridge was until we brought it to their attention. But this was all woods right in there, with the only access being off that road. And so we actually had all this area down here to park boats and stuff, so we stored boats there. But after a while, we started, when we put those 19 slips in, we started limiting the amount of boats coming down to the marina. And then when this road came, MnDOT actually, I think it's called a low-profile curb. They installed a low-profile curb so that the marina had access on and off to help the boats with trailers. And so I had actually put a sign up on a telephone pole, which was, used to have, signs, $5 for extra cars, or no slow down, no wake, just to keep people to go through there slower. But we had put a sign, no parking to the corner, to keep people from parking their boats and trailers on the road, or just parking their trailers on the road, because it does make it hard to get and back in. So up there by the trailer house is for our season passes. And Mark Hawes is here. He's the general manager of the marina, and he can talk more about the parking as it is today. But so that area there is for season passes, and we sell about 11, maybe 12, but I think we're down this year. We don't have as many, and we're down to like 19 or 20 dry store. But him and I have walked this area many a times about future parking. And so the future parking that we're looking at, the slips are going to come off here, but this whole area on this side could be accessed for future parking. And we could eliminate the dry store there without really having a detrimental effect on that revenue stream for store and launch. So that area, and then we don't park anything over here in this area. So that is another underutilized area that we could utilize for a revenue stream. But the key to that message is we can, if parking ever becomes an issue on the road, we don't like people parking on the road. It's not what we do. We have enough parking inside where people can park their cars without going out on the road. But if it ever did get to that issue and it was a bother to the city or there was an issue, they would just have to tell us and we'd start limiting those streams, of revenue streams. And that's kind of what he was mentioning about changing our business model from the old days to the new days. We'd just have to change the business model to more slips and less dry store and store and launch. The other thing in that letter today that he had sent out this afternoon, I'm not really sure if it was one of our members that sent it, because one, our members, they hadn't broadcast out this meeting to our membership, so hardly any of our members even knew about that, the meeting, which is unfortunate because I wish they would have came. The other thing too is they say that we stack cars, and it's true, we do stack cars, but as Justin mentioned, we stack cars for each boat. So there's not some car coming in and just randomly parking behind another car. That just doesn't happen. And if it does happen, we find out, Mark finds out about it right away, and we rectify that decision. He can talk more about that if you like. So we don't get a lot of stack parking where people are blocking people in. That just doesn't happen. It hasn't happened in the 20 years that we've been down there. So, I just wanted to bring that out. And then I'm here for any questions that you have for me.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for? Yeah, Commissioner
Sure.
Teichen?
Do you know how many parking spots you have on site?
Like he mentioned, it's kind of like a gravel parking lot, and we do have designated spots in certain areas. And what did I don't recall what I'd sent you. It was over 80 some parking spots currently. Like I said, we do have room for,
I can't see what you're pointing at, so,
this one area we can put,
yeah.
oh,
I can do that with this mouse. You want to point it out to me?
okay, yeah. So this area right over here, we can probably put in single cars, probably about 5 to 7 cars in that area alone. This area over on the south side, if right now we could probably put in 4 cars. And then if we remove these or move these dry store to a different area that's underutilized, we'd probably have 14 spots for cars. And then these spots here are all double car parking, or if maybe even more, you could probably put, some of them you could put 3 cars behind each other. And then, but all of those, you could put 2 cars behind each other.
So, and I'm not familiar with all these terms you're throwing out, so dry storage, parking, launch,
Okay.
what does all that
Sure.
mean?
So this area right around the circle here is dry store. So that's where people bring their boats down and they park them there through the year. So from April 1st to October 31st, they park their boats there, and then they can use the ramp anytime that they want. And then up by the house area, between the house and the road, is our store and launch, or our season passes. In the same time frame, they can come down and use the launch anytime, but they take their boats home with them. On weekends, they'll keep their boats there, Friday, Saturday nights, but when they go home, the boat goes with them. And so that's our season passes. And like right now, we're underutilized on our season passes, and then we're underutilized on our store and launch. The other thing too about that is, the season passes were primarily for fishermen that used to come down there all the time. And so they're only there, during the week in the mornings or on the weekends in the mornings, and then they're gone. So the 12 people who, if we had 12 folks, they're not there at the same time, right? Mark can speak to this too, but, we probably have 5 launches per day on Saturday and Sunday, and that's it. So about 5 cars there. So we could start utilizing that space, for, start eliminating the season passes and utilizing, moving the dry store over there to utilize this whole front area.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Tyken. Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Peters?
I'm trying to get a sense of when this was approved, up to the 80 slips back in, was it 2009? Then there were approximately 84 parking spots, but that was my understanding. So then, since then, and help me understand, I want to make sure I'm calculating this correctly. So there's the potential now of adding these 11, which would bring it up to the 80 slips total, plus potentially 25 of the dry storage, plus the 12 potential season passes. Now there's 117 items being used for, or, things, spots where people might be using vehicles for a parking lot that at the time was approved for that amount of 80 slips. So my struggle with this, then I'm seeing where you might be considering adding parking, but then that also converts some of what it looks like green space to a different kind of surface, right? Because it looks like it's grass and trees and things like that, but now that would be a hard surface. Would it be gravel or what?
Mark knows more about it, but from my visualization of it in pictures, it's kind of all gravelly with some ground cover, trying to grow through some of this kind of hard packed gravel stuff. I wouldn't call any of it
Okay.
very
But
turf.
even so, it seems like there's parking right now available for about the use of 80, but now it's going to increase, or it's not increased, but it seems like there's up to 117 with the 80, the 25, and the 11 or 12.
Yeah, so what Mr. Fraser mentioned at the beginning when he was talking was that the dry storage and launch is something that they've always done for a long time. I wasn't aware, reading through the 2009 staff report, that was mentioned, but that evidently is not a new use. And I guess thinking back, I've always seen boats parked there throughout the season. So am I correct?
Yeah, and then I'm not sure that, I thought we would have had back in the 2009, 2010 permit from the city, there might have been more spaces. And there were underutilized spaces. The space that's up on the north end was really underutilized, where there would be only like 4 cars parked there. That would be this end up here. And then we kind of, over the years, we've redesigned it, because realistically, we are in the business of space, right? Whether it's space on the water, space on land, we rent space. And so we tried to work the best we could, but in the same token, keeping it small and kind of homey. We could realistically go through it and get an engineer and come through and redesign the whole parking lot. But we never did that, because I know everything just seemed to work for us. And Mark, like I said, Mark could talk too about the parking. He deals with that day in and day out about the parking, and it's always worked for us.
Have you ever needed to have people park out on the street?
No, we have never, since the bridge project, we don't allow people to park on the street with their boat and trailers. That's just not what we do.
I'd like to also mention, it's not an exact science determining parking requirements. We sure don't ever require parking to satisfy the extreme situation. We don't require commercial establishments to have enough parking for their fire code capacity or for Black Friday shopping. We just try to determine what the best number is to handle, I don't even know, 80% of the parking needs or more. And again, like I said, we don't have any standards for this use. I don't like you see on this aerial picture, I don't know, this is in the spring, I'm not sure what the date was or the time, but, you know, how many boats are taken out? Maybe the 3rd?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the boats are not in here. A lot of them are on the hard here too for over winter. Because you can see the boat on this area right by the launch, that, we don't store boats there, so that would be where a boat is stored during the winter time. And this particular project here that we're talking about today really won't start until next year. So if we have to modify our parking needs, that means next year we just won't allow that many more dry dock or that many more season passes, so.
So you'll kind of swap.
Correct, yep,
Okay.
yeah,
'Cause
so
I
that,
wasn't sure, I know that like for boat launches, it's hard to get spots, so I'm assuming that whatever capacity you have will be used, but you're saying like you'll swap out if
Yep.
if you're adding those slips, then you won't have the other piece. Okay, so it's
Yep.
not really going to add vehicles then? It'll be similar to now, you're just swapping how
yeah.
they're used, okay.
And I think we'd be able to put in more cars, because you know where we do the dry store, when people come and launch their boats, they keep their trailer connected and park it in the back lot. So that's actually like 2 cars, you know, maybe 2.5 if that's a long boat of parking there for cars. So I think it'll work out well, actually, and so that, we're kind of excited for that.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Peters. Commissioners, any other questions?
Thanks,
Do we have anybody else who would like to speak on this subject? Anybody in Zoom or rerunning Zoom?
I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. All right, if you're on Zoom, feel free to submit your comments via email at a later time. All right, we'll get those. Okay. All right, commissioners, all right, do we have nobody else wishes to speak? We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Public hearing is now closed. Commissioners, open for discussion, comments, questions? Commissioner
I
Tyken.
guess I'll start up. This one's really hard for me, and I think it's really bad that we don't have standards. If this was a Jimmy John's or a Target or somebody coming into the city, there'd be green space standards, there'd be parking standards, there'd be all kinds of standards. We have an open lot next to a river that 80-some people can park in and drain oil in the parking lot, and the flood comes by and all that washes downstream. It's sad that we don't have something to protect. It's all hard space by the looks of it, so there's no way for water to infiltrate it. And again, I know we're on a river, but we should be taking care of the river more than we're taking care of businesses. So it's a struggle for me that we have all these standards for all these businesses that come in here, and we don't have a standard for this. And this isn't the only marina in town. So it's kind of surprising that we haven't run into this before. And I get what you're saying, that we don't make Walmart build to Black Friday standards, but they do have a standard, and it's consistent across everybody. 84 spots and 117 and potential uses. You know, I boat, not on a river, but locally, and you know, there's usually 2 or 3 cars when we go out, because friends and family come out with me. So I'm struggling with this a lot because there's no standard, so how do we look at it? Has the city looked at any other cities that have standards around marina parking?
No, I mean, I haven't, and it wasn't anything that was studied for the 2009 approval.
Yeah, no, I get that, and we can fix the things we've done in the past. We do it all the time. So I struggle with this, so I'd like to hear what other people think.
All right, Commissioner Tyken, thank you. Commissioner Mansky?
So when we establish standards, I always think of what would we do if we had a fire? What would we do if we needed emergency services out there, such as ambulance? Would we be able to access the parts of the marina that need to be accessed with those services? I mean, without seeing a clear layout of how things are laid out and how people park out there, what happens if we have such things as those services needed? I mean, we never think about it until you try and get a fire truck in there or an ambulance in there and you can't. So, that's the only question I would have is there's no defined parking and therefore, and no defined how many cars can be there. How do you get around, and when you decide that, has this been reviewed by somebody at the fire marshal or the fire department, or?
So this is not a site plan. If this was a new use and they were coming for approval, it would be a full site plan, and they would be required to have improved parking lot, and they would be required to have holding ponds, in all that. We still wouldn't have an exact number to rely on for the number of parking spots. We could try to come up with something and maybe work with them and see if they'd be willing to put in, what we find the averages of places that maybe have standards for this type of use. I don't know if there are any, and just try to work something out. But that's the time when all that is reviewed, and it might have happened when this started. I imagine this probably started, before that was common practice. But with conditional use permit for adding 11 slips and nothing on the site is being modified, we don't have the ability to do a site plan and impose any of those new improvements that are in the requirements now, but obviously weren't when it was originally designed.
Right, so this is nothing new, it's not new, we're just shifting an originally approved concept over to a different part of it with the blessing of the DNR and all the parties involved. It's not actually a site plan where we can actually change anything about the original plan. We're just asking to review moving 11 slips, which were gonna be built anyway, from over here down to right along the shoreline with the dredge site and what do they call that material? I am not an engineer or anything close to it, and I don't go boating, so I don't know. Dredge material. Okay. Oh, okay, all right. Where the dredge material is gonna go, and then the slips are gonna go. So these 11 slips were originally approved, correct? At some earlier on, they just were approved for a different location, and now the DNR has said, well, better idea would be to put them here instead. Less impact than originally planned because of all the changes over the years.
Yeah, technically it was approved in 2009. Well, the whole general concept was approved with the EAW in 2008. 2009, the conditional use permit was issued, and then in 2010 it was reaffirmed because I think it had expired because they hadn't done anything at that point, so they had it reaffirmed again and then had put in the majority of them.
Well, believe it or not, over the weekend I did drive after work the spiral loop, both Saturday and Sunday, and there was no issues. You wouldn't even have known that there were people there unless you went down into the parking lot and looked really hard for the trailers and so forth. So I didn't see any issues with the parking on the road at all. So without the benefit of knowing who wrote this, I really can't support that notion because I don't have anything to go by other than my own eyes, and I've never seen any issues with any vehicles parking on the road at all, on either side of 61. So unfortunately, since it's anonymous, there's nothing I can't do anything with that. But commissioners, any other? Commissioner Romans.
Justin, so this is essentially amending the old CUP, right?
Yeah, it's more like,
Because if they did nothing, they wouldn't have to do anything right now. That conditional use permit does not expire, does not,
right, the original conditional use permit is not expired because they did do improvements that were approved with it.
Yeah.
So that conditional use permit will run with the land and won't ever expire. The reason why we're here reviewing this is because they are proposing to put them in a different location than was originally proposed.
okay. So yeah, I kind of follow along the same idea here. If we narrow this down to, we're just looking at where those have been moved. Regardless of whatever the site plan was approved at whatever point in time, that's a little bit out of our jurisdiction at this point in time. Yeah, would things be a little bit nicer in a different way, or, you know, I do bring up the same thoughts about the stormwater runoff from any vehicles or something like that, but that is, you know, that it can be an issue handled by MPCA if it needs to be. So overall, I have no problem with it being moved over to the other side here, as long as it's met with conditions of the engineers and DNR and MnDOT. It seems to be applicable in the same way it was in 2009. So that's all I had. Thanks. If we're all good, I can make a motion to approve. Let me get into that. I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit 2022-45, the marina at 6 Spiral View Loop,
All right.
with the attached conditions.
Subject to the condition. Okay.
Yes.
All right. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Romans. Do I have a second? Commissioner Tigan? Further discussion? Okay, no. Do I have a second? If not, I'll go ahead and second it. All right, second by me. All right, any further discussion, new discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay?
One nay.
Okay.
2 days.
All right, so 2 nays, one Commissioner Tigan, one Commissioner Peters. So you have 2 ayes and 2 nays. And we are missing.
Yep, so we don't have enough to, for an for that to pass.
Okay.
So it'll go to the next city council meeting with that, without a recommendation for approval.
Okay, all right. All right, there you go. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
when's that going to go to the city council?
Oh, yeah, what date is that?
The 4th, or it'd be the 5th.
Yeah, yeah, probably the 5th.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are now on to other business. Justin?
I guess the only business I have would be the approvals that city council made at their last meeting following a planning commission meeting. They approved the variance for the additional accessory structure on First Street, East First Street, and approval of the site plan for KFC on Vermillion Street. That was a split vote. I don't recall how many dissents there were, but it passed.
I have a question about that.
Jake, go ahead.
Did they say when they're going to break ground on the KFC?
I don't recall if I ever heard from them.
I'm just curious. I'm a very curious guy, so, all right, thanks.
I don't think they said, I watched it, they didn't have any kind of a timeline.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know that I've ever heard it from them in discussions, but
Okay.
I'd probably start this year still.
Okay.
It's nice to see the dairy store move over as quick as they did.
Yeah. Any other business, Justin, or
Nope. not-
commissioners, any other business? Nope. All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, Commissioner Tyken, second. Commissioner Romans?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.